Michael from Pennsylvania hit my line on the DMs. All right. Okay. Hello. Michael from Pennsylvania, also known as Central_Committee. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I have my camera on if you want.
Yeah. Wait.
What's up, man?
No, I'm gonna pop it open. Don't worry.
Beautiful.
I'm just trying to
Everyone
make it.
can see my beautiful face.
Okay. All right. What's happening?
Well, you know, I think I'm in the dissenting seat for this community, and for the people who've been on here before.
Not really. I think there's a lot of people in my community that think Trump is definitely a lock. I would say more people probably in this community think Trump is a lock than even myself. I have brought forward people to make a convincing case as to why Kamala Harris still has a shot. I still think there is a likelihood that Kamala Harris will win, but that likelihood is so fucking small now that it's a massive toss up. I'm not talking about the way that the media has covered this issue. I just wanted to hear the most doomer analysis from you as someone who is in Pennsylvania, who has worked in Pennsylvania local politics. I think I value your analysis, especially on that front. And, I have brought forward a broad variety of different opinions on the matter, but I want to hear what your argument is as to why Kamala Harris is going to get fucking absolutely cooked.
Well, the first thing that I would say is it's a combination of a lot of factors. Is one of the theories that I've been pushing for most of my political career is that all politics is national now. Our local politics is becoming less and less and less relevant, and states are starting to look more like each other, especially those that are close to them. And the thing about Pennsylvania is, and this is also similar in Nevada, where basically what we're seeing so far, and I think early voting is the realm of charlatans, the people that talk about early voting and oh, we know this is going to happen because of this. You don't really know what the contents of the vote are. At the most, you have registration and whatnot. But one thing we can look at is people of a certain registration and what their propensity to vote is, and which group of people have been showing up at higher rates than others. And the reason why I'm very doomer on Harris is we've seen a lot of evidence is that the turnout among low propensity Democrats is way down, and the turnout among low propensity Republicans is up in a similar to 2020, except we don't have the COVID mail-in ballot a turnout boost. So that we're seeing a differential turnout for the Republican leaners are higher than the Democratic leaners. This is very true in Nevada. I think Republicans have an outright turnout advantage, which they did not have in 2020.
Yeah.
They're up by a lot. In Pennsylvania, I think we have the Democrats up by around 300,000 net, and they need to be at least 500,000 to win statewide. So she's way behind where she needs to be. And then also with Pennsylvania registration, there's been a continual shift of people from Democrat to Republican, a significant number more. I think it's 80,000 more people registered Republican than Democrat over the last year. It might even be more. I'd have to look it up again. But that's kind of my main thrust is and it kind of tracks with my own vibes, which is why I kind of lend it a little bit of credence, which is it's 2 weeks before the election. What am I doing? What is the internet political discussion? It's not people all unifying around Harris like it was in 2020. I don't know if you guys remember back then, but my community and your community, we were all kind of pushing for Biden. We were saying, no,
I voted for Joseph, Robin, and Brandon.
And we were vote for him. We got to get Trump out of there. And we were laughing over Trump getting sick from COVID a week before the election and being look at this idiot. When he did that stupid mask ripoff and he looked really weak. and everybody was like, you know, he had to get helicoptered to, you know, like just the whole vibe was a lot different than now, which is we're engaged in infighting. Like the left of the party is under attack. It's a vote shaming thing. It's worse than 2016. There's a lot of young people that are not seeing anything like about Gaza to give them any hope. As far as like she's campaigning with the Cheneys, you know, like the progressive wing has been completely abandoned. I think you saw that Nation article from the interns at the Nation.
Yeah.
I don't think that is just a bubble. I think that is a sense that's like out there that, you know,
so
vote for her because of what I genocide.
Think. Are you ready for this? Like I think that not to get all Nate Cohn over here, but I think that if like what I'm looking at right now is what the Democratic Party has very openly communicated. They're saying they have a pathway to victory that does not revolve around people who care about American foreign policy, people who care about Israel and Gaza, and young voters that they are relying on. They believe that those are firmly planted, that like there is going to be enough turnout from the youth vote that makes up for, the Philadelphia, like there's going to be enough black and brown and young Philadelphians that are voting in urban areas. And then that the real problem here is to just like decouple former Republicans or never Trump Republicans away from Donald Trump and just get them to go out and vote. It's very clear that we both agree that that's their strategy, right? Like that's precisely what they're doing. They are gambling with their regular constituencies and their propensity to turn out because they are taking it for granted and they are hyper focusing on a couple key targeted swing districts, a couple key suburbs, basically, where there are college educated white voters who have either, logged themselves as independents and have fucking voted for Donald Trump twice or at least once. And they are trying to get those guys to come out and vote for the Democratic Party. Now,
I just think that has absolutely no chance of working because, like, I think a lot of people take large swaths of the electorate for granted, and that's not how people operate. I have this. This is something I showed before, but I just popping it on my camera real quick.
Yeah.
But basically, tell me how interested you are in this election using scale 1 to 10. This is the lowest it's been for black voters and young voters, like going back to 2004.
Oh no, I remember looking at this data as well. Yes, this is very, very important. I totally agree with you.
Disastrous for the Democrats. Like, there's really no way to make that up with like swinging somebody who's a like suburban voter. And there's been $200 million spent in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so that's
this election cycle, and the numbers are bad. Like they're not. She's like she's well behind like previous Democratic candidates at this point in the race.
So that's the real problem here that I have been screaming about for months at this point is that like obviously the message that you are presenting is unsuccessful if you've dumped $200 million into communicating that message in every fucking ad possible and the polls have not even shifted, right? Or worse, shifted in Trump's favor. So clearly the message isn't working. Now, of course, they're too fucking late at this point. It's too late for them to just like all of a sudden communicate a very different message. And I think that like ultimately it's leaving it on it's a coin toss. Like it's leaving it up to a very dangerous gamble that like Philadelphia urban voters are going to turn out no matter what because they're worried about Roe v. Wade. They're worried about like Trump being a fascist, and they're going to do the lesser evil voting. They're going to do the harm reduction voting in enough numbers that they can fucking cling on to a couple of these suburban voters. Which, by the way, polls have shown that method is unsuccessful. That's the craziest part about this. I guess like in general polls, it shows that Kamala Harris is leading. Or is leading on Biden in terms of like white college educated voters. I have seen that. Like, she has maintained a strong presence in white college educated voters. It just matters. It's entirely dependent on where those white college educated voters are. If they're not in Pennsylvania, she's fucking cooked. Because
I think the thing for me is like, first of all, she hasn't given people a reason to believe she should be trusted with the presidency. Like, at the end of the day, they reject Joe Biden. And her mission should have been show a vision for the country that would have been different than Joe Biden, a change election. And the reason why that was necessary is there was a Franklin and Marshall poll that just came out. I can link it to you if you want. But basically, it goes through all this stuff. This is in Pennsylvania, and it's disastrous. It's fucking disastrous. Like,
is it the legislative session? Shapiro insults protesters. No.
Here, I linked it to you. I linked it in chat.
No, link it in the Discord chat.
Oh yeah, that's old as fuck.
Yeah,
here, I'll link it to you.
Oh, I got it. I found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Dear readers, I'm okay.
If you scroll down, and the thing that really shocks me is the last time Pennsylvania residents thought their finances had been better than 1 year ago was October 2020.
Yeah, I see that.
So basically, for the entire time Biden has been president, people have been saying, no, my finances are worse off than a year ago. And like that, you can't ignore that. And like Kamala Harris did. And she just basically said, I wouldn't have done anything different than Biden. And that's the message people got. And as that's the message has gotten out, her momentum ended. It stalled completely.
Do you think, and this is crazy because like voters originally said that they weren't going to punish Kamala with Biden's economy.
She hugged him.
She had a blank slate when the swap out first occurred, which was crazy. It was like, I remember looking at polls being like, that's what a gift. What a gift to the Kamala Harris campaign.
This is something like when she first dropped out, I know you and I were like completely open to her. And I feel like that was a sign, we were representative in our communities of like the larger youth progressive wing of the parties where we were like, okay. And then when Walz was picked, we were like, okay. And like, we were all chomping at the bit, ready to, jump on, become K-hivers. And the reality is, she went into the DNC. She made that disastrous right-wing speech. Ezra Klein of the New York Times, he did an analysis of it, and he said it was the most right-wing Democratic nomination speech he'd ever heard. Yeah, and it was. And that's when the momentum stopped. And all the momentum she was seeing, all the movement in the polls that got her ahead of Trump was young people, was, progressives coming home, was, and a lot of people think of this like ideology in a totally wrong way. They think of like, if somebody says they're moderate, it means they're a neoliberal centrist. And that's not what it is. It's more of a statement of your own like persona or your own like feelings about like time
and time again ballot measures have consistently proven that the most popular thing in the heartland, in the Midwest, in the Sun Belt, no matter where you go, is a lifeless, faceless, progressive ballot measure not associated with a Democrat directly. Americans love voting for instituting full-blown communism in the form of a progressive ballot measure, but fucking despise the Democrats or despise the Republicans as well, depending on where you're looking at. So yes, the idea that like the average independent moderate who fancies themselves to be in directly the center of all of these issues is a silly one. And ironically enough, that's why I was excited about the Tim Walz prospect, because I thought that would actually force the Democratic Party's hand into putting forward or at least defending a progressive message. Because Tim Walz, with a one-person majority in the state Senate in Minnesota, actually signed into law many of these measures that were considered radical by the Republican Party and maybe even radical by some in the Democratic coalition.
Well, here's the thing that's really interesting about that is notice how none of the attacks on Tim Walz were about the policies he passed in Minnesota.
Yeah. It was about fucking how he has a fake dog or how he abuses his son or all this shit. Exactly. They originally laughed and were like, oh, what a stupid mistake that they went with radical Tim Walz. He's a communist. And none of that shit actually worked even a little bit. But the problem is the Democrats actually fucking moved away from that. And it's very frustrating, especially when you have one of your most popular policies in a sea of boring neoliberal bullshit be that you are going to tackle price gougers at the federal level with pre-existing law that already is out there?
Has is the most popular thing.
Yes, and it's very frustrating that they are not. It's very frustrating that they're not fucking. They didn't push that hard enough. Even though Donald Trump kept saying that's like Venezuela. And the only thing that happened to that policy was that it grew in popularity in that process. It literally became more popular despite the New York Times op-eds about fucking how, this is impossible to implement and Kamala is just doing this or Republicans consistently attacking it. Yeah, the moderate voters are all over the ideological map. You want to explain this to people?
So basically, I popped up from my camera. Basically,
go
this
ahead.
is a
I'm going to go pee while you explain this.
Yeah,
I've heard this a million times, but let's hear it.
This is a study from a few years ago, but it still holds true. Overwhelmingly, so this is basically a political, compass with tilted on the edge. So like the top and the left squares are like the left wing economics positions. And then being more pro-immigration is the bottom and the left. Okay. So what you'll see, and these are people who call themselves moderates, and they were all given an ideological test. And one of the things you'll find really interesting about here is the overwhelming majority of people who consider themselves moderate are very left wing. And then the 2/3 to like 70% of people are left wing economically. Almost no one is a libertarian who considers themselves. So like libertarian square is the bottom square. There's almost no one there. And actually, there are some people who call themselves moderate who are extremely right wing, but it's very rare. So basically, when you're running on, when you see people saying like, oh, a lot of people are moderate, but that actually that's a label that's not connected to ideology. It's not like a lot of people are Joe Manchin. That's just not the case. And so that we've known this for a very, very long time, that self-described ideology doesn't describe what people support. And we can have real world tests of this. Like, for example, in Florida, over 60% of people voted to restore felon voting rights. Over 60% of people voted for a $15 minimum wage. At the same time, Donald Trump was winning by like 8 points. They were getting 60% for the $50. So people are not voting for these candidates as ideological like decisions. It's a lot different than that. And so when Kamala Harris goes to the right on these issues, what she's actually doing is not really winning over a population that exists. The people that are like, I love Liz Cheney are not real. The people that love Liz Cheney are actually liberals who appreciate her shitting on Trump.
Yes.
So these are anti-Trump liberals, and they see a Republican spitting in Trump's face, and they like that. It's not like a moderate Republican who loves Liz Cheney.
She does not have. I mean, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is the greatest example of this. Nikki Haley is the perfect example of this. Nikki Haley ran against Donald Trump. Nikki Haley said, whoever swaps their candidate first wins this election. Okay, but when it was Biden versus Trump, Nikki Haley literally is pro-Trump. She's voting for Trump. Nikki Haley voters are also voting for Trump. A lot of Nikki Haley voters in open primaries were actually Democrats who also either registered for the Republican Party to vote for Nikki Haley or are also, going to end up, if they were Republicans, are going to end up voting for Donald Trump. Going after this Nikki Haley constituency is so fucking stupid. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party has done. Now, here is the other side of the equation. And this is why I think that Trump's chances are not great, regardless. Trump, what would you say to the argument that like Trump is maxed out on support? Would you agree with that assessment? That he is like...
No, probably not. Just because like we've seen him significantly get more popular in kind of a nostalgic way. Because like if you look at, I would say that like he does have kind of a ceiling near 50%, but it is high enough that he can win. So you know what I mean? Like and if you look at his like approval rating, like his favorability has improved significantly from 2016.
Yeah, that's
true. He's actually in the most favorable he's ever been. People think of his presidency as relatively more successful than Biden's. And, they don't really hold the COVID thing against him. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't think people really hold COVID against Biden either. They just hold the inflation against Biden. And whereas with Trump, they think of like the pre-inflation low interest rate growth period, right?
Mike is
that's
right.
Just the way
Trump,
it is.
Mike is right.
That's the way it is.
Trump has never been this popular in any of the elections that he has run. This is the most popular he has been at this stage in the election. That is objectively correct. Okay.
Now he's not he's not popular. Like
yes.
He's still net negative.
Yes.
But
Yes. That's what I'm saying. This is the most popular he has ever been while running in an election. Okay. Elections that he's won, election that he lost, doesn't matter. This is the most popular he has ever been. In terms of the electoral support, I believe this is the highest he has had as well in the polls.
Yeah.
Like,
no, he's never been better in the polls.
Yes.
In the 3 elections, like the polls right now, Trump has never been better. Never.
Yes. So
like for me, that's the kind of thing that I look at where I do like a sanity check. Like, okay, is it possible that the polls are wrong and that Harris is like could win? The answer is yes. I think whenever you're looking at polls from a scientific perspective, you should look at that and recognize they have a margin of error and it's possible. And then when we start to think about like, okay, historically, why did the polls get it wrong? Why were they underestimating Trump in both 2016 and 2020? And the answer is a certain type of low propensity Republican voter turning out and being hard to poll. And the question I keep asking myself is, does it seem like with the evidence available that those people are showing up again? And does Kamala Harris have a commensurate like rise in low propensity Democrat voters?
Hold on. Or where they're showing up. That's important too. I think that like my argument or my vibe overall on this is that there is a very high likelihood that Trump can win. I still think Kamala Harris is like I put her
she's an underdog at this point.
I put Kamala Harris like marginally in a better shot than Donald Trump, because I do think that the polls, at least pollsters from what I have seen, have slammed at least 2 points in Trump's favor in an effort not to repeat the mistakes of 2016. And even Trump overperformed the polls in 2020 as well, to not to the same degree, but like he obviously overperformed polls in 2016. And he also overperformed the polls in 2020 as well.
He actually
so this time I think pollsters are like literally fucking slamming 2 points no matter what.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that because like he did overperform the polls more in 2020 than he did in 2016. He was just further behind Biden in the polls. So like the polls had Biden up like 8. He ends up winning by 3. Well, that's a 5-point error, but he was so far ahead in the polls that he still won, right? Whereas in 2016, Hillary was up 3 or 4 in the polls, and then she ends up losing the close states. So she loses, and the polls were wrong like by 2 points, right? So the 2 points were more relevant because of where they were, like how the numbers were looking. But 2020 was actually worse. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, have the pollsters figured out how to poll the electorate that supports Donald Trump in general elections correctly? And I don't think we can know that until the actual election happens, which is why I have any. If I thought that they had done that, then I would say the polls are accurate. But the reason I think, if you're betting to me, I think that it's much more likely that they got it wrong again, because it's very hard to like get these people.
Yeah, no, it's notoriously difficult, which is why I think they're just straight slamming 2 extra points. That's what I'm saying.
I don't see any evidence that they're just doing that shy Trump adjustment. Like, so it's funny you mentioned this, because back in 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn was running for the first time as the nominee for Labor in a general election, and the polls were all very much in favor of the Tories because they had this shy Tory weighting on it. And I was one of those people that looked into it and said, oh no, I think Corbyn's going to massively overperform. And he ended up he almost won the election outright. But there was a massive polling error against the Tories in 2015 because of that shy Tory weighting that was being applied. I don't think I see any shy Republican weighting being applied.
No, I don't think I don't think it's shy Republicans. I don't think it's a matter of shy Republicans. I think it's a matter of like it not being able to predict low and mid propensity voters accurately. So they're just like throwing that on the board. Like they're just they're just weighing it in that direction so that they don't come short again. That's what I think is going on, because I don't think no Trump supporter is shy at this point. Okay, there's no.
That's what I.
Yeah, they're loud as fuck. Okay, they love Donald Trump. They love saying they love Donald Trump. They're calling him daddy. They're fucking insane over there. I don't think it's the
they're
shy.
Saying spank me. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I don't think it's the shy Trump voters necessarily. I think it's more so like how many of the fucking crackhead constituency that like how many of the podcasters, like podcast watchers, divorced dads galore are actually going to turn out on election day and go out and vote because they're legitimately fucking they think Kamala Harris is a Marxist or whatever the fuck they believe.
Well, I mean, I think the place to look, like, about the Nevada, like Ralston, right?
Yeah. That's
So
not looking good for the Democrats.
He's been covering it pretty. So this is not Pennsylvania, so I don't know. I mean, I lived in Nevada for a bit, but I don't know it as well as Pennsylvania. But what I understand is like they're massively underperforming like ever before. Like in the early voting, like the Democrats are actually less turning out in early vote, and that's like never before happened because of the Reid machine. And one of the things that was really interesting is a GOP operative, and this is quoting from Ralston, Jeremy Hughes, said that the problem for Democrats comes up when we look at the low propensity voters. GOP 204 voters. So when you say somebody's 204, you're talking about the last general elections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a 204, you're a low propensity voter. Means you've missed two of the last 4 general elections. We consider that low propensity. Anybody below 3 of 4 is low propensity voter, right? So of the 2 of 4 voters, they have 25.3% turnout among GOP. Of Dem 204, it's 20.9% turnout so far. So
but that tracks. That literally is like represented in the national data as well. That's like the assessment
that means Harris loses.
Yeah, that would
be terrible.
So that is precisely the reason why I've been like, that is what I foresee as like possibly being Kamala Harris's demise, is that low and mid propensity voters do turn out specifically in the states that Kamala Harris needs to win. And Kamala Harris actually hemorrhages enough of her base, like the reliable votes that she normally gets from urban areas, younger voters, black and brown voters, and hyper focuses far too much on the Republicans in the suburbs, which have proven to be ineffective with all of the communications she's put out so far, and it doesn't carry her across the finish line. Like I'm on that. I understand that completely. I've been screaming about it for months. I just I still think that there is a pathway to victory.
I mean, she could win, but like, as I said, because polls can always be wrong. They could you could have a polling error against her. I have a theory of the case for her if you want to hear it later, but I'm not very confident in it. And the reason why is because like one of the things that was really interesting in this data that I saw is that the GOP is winning among new voters and voters who have never voted before. Like of people that are registered Republican but who have never voted before, they have 17.8% turnout for the GOP right now in the early vote, and among Dem voters, it's 13.9%. So that's like so like people that are newly registered are turning out at a much higher rate if they register as a Republican. Thus far, this is early voting. We got to wait till all the way to election day. I do think that there tends to be an advantage of non-college educated voters the closer you get turning up, which I think Nevada, like I always thought Nevada would probably be held by the Democrats, but because they have such a weak Senate candidate, but I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to doom too hard. I'm concerned that, though, this might actually be like a Trump popular vote win just based on these numbers that we're seeing. And that would be absolutely cooked. And I think the evidence is strong enough there to be concerned about that.
You don't think that there's a Trump popular vote victory where he still loses the Electoral College, though?
That would only happen if she managed to hold Michigan, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And I think any election path that requires Michigan to be held by Harris is very suspect. I think people really are underestimating the damage that has been done by Gaza because they don't want to deal with it until it actually happens. They're like in denial about it. They're like, no, they won't vote for the Muslim ban guy. And they just kind of turn off their brain and they don't look into the data at all. And if you look at I think Biden won by, how much did he win Michigan by, chat? I was going to say 80,000, but I don't remember.
I think it was 100,000.
Okay, 100,000. Like there are, 300,000 Arabs and Muslim voters in Michigan. Like,
yeah, and I think they voted for Biden by like 70%. Yeah, 70. Yeah.
So that's like that, and that's the entire gap. I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, the path would be that she does move the numbers among white voters closer to, like, she does even better than Biden does with white voters overall. I find that hard to believe. I legitimately find that like almost unbelievable. The idea that Joe Biden would do worse with white voters than Harris would do.
I think that the math comes down to white women. Like, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, are white women finally not going to vote for Trump as the majority? And I don't know where that is right now. But I think if Kamala Harris secures white women as the majority voting bloc, then she has a chance of winning the election. The problem, however, is that when you look at Arizona polling, where abortion is on the ballot, when you look at Florida polling, where abortion is also on the ballot, well, I guess Florida is a unique case in and of itself.
Florida is like, I think the Republicans are up 10 in the early vote right now.
Yeah, Florida doesn't like, make Miami any sense. It doesn't matter, now. But
that's crazy.
In midterms, and in other special elections, like obviously abortion being on the ballot has greatly favored the Democratic Party in terms of turnout. In the general election, it's a little bit different than midterms. It's a little bit different than it's obviously very different than like special elections. I think that like not Florida, but Arizona as an example is more important to see if like this kind of additional turnout specifically on abortion, does that allow Kamala Harris a benefit, an electoral boost? And I think that for a lot of white women in red states, I do not know if they will be able to shake off white supremacy as being their primary motivator here, or they can very selfishly go, yeah, I want to protect abortion, and also I'm not going to punish the guy who took it away from me and my daughters, and then turn around and still vote for Donald Trump gladly.
I feel like one of the problems that we have is that the Democratic Party hasn't like drawn those lines, like, because they want to do this thing where they like kiss Republican ass, but they don't want to, like 95% of Republicans are going to vote for Trump. And Democrats don't deal with that, that problem. Like they don't go to the voters and say the Republicans are Trump supporters, and Trump supporters are wrong. They're scared to say that.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, the Republicans are like, these are criminals over there. All Democrats should go to hell, and that creates a certain like distance from the consequences of the Republican Party's policies. She doesn't want to attack the Supreme Court. Like, remember, she was on that town hall and she was asked about the Supreme Court getting expanded, and she said we should study it. Well,
oh my God. Oh, that was so bad.
They already studied it. Biden did an executive order in 2001. They published a report, like, I think it was even early this year, about studying the Supreme Court reform. And they came up with the idea of like term limits or something. And so she's basically just running on studying it again.
Yeah, no, she has like, concepts of a plan. That's her concepts of a plan shit. Like Kamala Harris is like she always does this. She used to do this in 2019. We used to make fun of it, where she would be like, we're going to begin to start thinking about the steps that we must take in the future as a prospect arises. It's like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, that's not an answer. You're just dancing around the fucking issue.
And I think the reason why it's bad is a number of things. First of all, it keeps the Republican Party like free and clear from the consequences of their policies, like on abortion, overturning abortion. The second thing is it doesn't give Democrats, it doesn't like force Democratic politicians to take public positions on court reform. So even if she does win and we do get a trifecta. We're not getting court reform because they didn't prepare the party for it. They didn't make it, they didn't run on it. So they're not going to suddenly like come and do this big radical reformation, so it's not possible to reform it. And then the Democratic base voters are not equipped with the knowledge of knowing who's to blame. So regular people aren't going to figure that out either. So you're kind of like expecting people to be like super educated about, who's to blame for who in 30 years of Supreme Court precedent in history, but also not blame Harris for not having a clear plan. So people are supposed to be educated, not want a plan to fix it, but then ignore the fact that there's no plan. It is an incoherence. And this is a problem with Harris, is she wasn't challenged in a primary. She wasn't forced to like come out and make promises and give concessions to various groups to win a primary election that are in the Democratic Party and kind of shore up her base. Yeah. And so she's kind of just like assumed the base is there, and now she's going to the right, and there's a big problems with the base. And the turnout and the vibe is down because of, the genocide is clearly one. She said fuck you to everybody to the left of Attila the Hun. She's holding hands with Dick Cheney. And like, it's not that these people are going to vote for Trump. They're just not going to show up.
Yeah, no, that's my theory
of the case.
No, okay. So we're in agreement there. I'm like, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't even think she's done enough fear mongering against Donald Trump, which is kind of crazy to say. Like, I don't think that she has actively communicated what
she agrees with his immigration policy. Except for that's
the major issue. That is exactly the major issue here. Like, one of the things that has made me so angry in the way that the Democratic Party has presented immigration as like they are going to be the border, they're going to be the border party, is so fucking stupid. Not because you're making a concession that like immigrants constitute a national security threat, which is unique in the history of the Democratic Party, at least in contemporary history. This is a unique thing that the Democratic Party has given ground to. Okay. And that makes voters in your own base go, wait, what the fuck? Okay. So I guess we're for the border wall. All right. Well, the other guy has been pro border wall always. And you just now look like a flip flopper. But beyond that, I think that it is a terrible place to it's a terrible way to communicate a winning message, because now you can't even bring up how Donald Trump is an extremist on the fucking border. They are genuinely, I think, fearful that if they bring up Donald Trump's insane anti-immigrant policies as a massive problem, because they saw that one fucking poll that said like 60% want mass deportations, they're now stuck with this idea that like if we tell people that that's going to happen, like that people are going to run in and set up concentration camps once Trump is president, that everyone's going to go, oh, I love that.
Well, first
and they're not even actively communicating how fucking devastating that will look like for the humanity of these supposedly 20 million people that have been living in your fucking neighborhoods, that work at jobs that you don't see, that you take for granted, but then also the economic issues that come along with that as well. Like all of these, a litany of problems, and they're not actively separating themselves and positioning themselves against the Republican Party's policies on the matter by simply saying, oh, they're ineffective. They're not effective enough to be the immigrant mutilator party. We will be the immigrant destroyer party. It's very stupid.
Well, I think the main thing is, first of all, they never care what issue polls say. Okay, like, 70% of people support a public option for healthcare. They're not running on it. Why not? I mean, because they don't care. They don't care to run on things that are popular. They are... That has nothing to do with what they're trying to do. So why are they doing this like right-wing immigration ploy? It's the same thing that Obama tried. He was the porter in chief. They tried this whole strategy of run to the right and then we'll compromise with the Republicans. Biden tried it. He said, we'll do Trump's immigration policy. And they said, fuck you. We want mass deportations on top of it, And the main issue that we have here is that the Democratic Party is too far right. And they created this immigration disaster because they maintained Trump's policies on Cuba and Venezuela, where they did economic sanctions and they destroyed these economies, and they sent millions of refugees to the United States to flee these situations that are created by our foreign policy. and Joe Biden is a psychopath, warmonger, neocon on foreign policy.
Yeah.
And so he likes it. He wants to have Venezuela's economy destroyed. He wants Cuba's economy destroyed.
For sure.
And he doesn't want to pursue like they had a trifecta. They could have pursued some sort of policy. But again, he loves the filibuster. So these disasters exist. And they exist because of the policies that the Democratic Party supported. And now there are consequences for supporting it. And the solution that they've come up with is adopt Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. There's no way that people who are racist against immigrants are going to choose Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, no matter what Kamala Harris says. If Kamala Harris set up a death camp for immigrants, they would still vote for Trump over her. So what is she even do? What's the point of this?
Yeah.
And it kind of tells you that their main goal is not really these policies. It's more of a kind of shaping the electorate in the way that they only want to win a certain way, right? They only want to win with this kind of neoliberal interventionist, American hegemonic version of the Democratic Party. They don't want to win with like a FDR. Like FDR ran on the good neighbor policy, which is we don't interfere with you.
Yeah.
That was
that was the wall. That was the Waltz message as well. It's like, you don't, we're not going to. That was such a banger message on both abortion, trans issues, everything. You could just like slap that on and be like, why the fuck is the government interfering with a medical professional and the decisions that a healthcare professional is making with a fucking patient? Like, it's not up to us. It's up to the professionals. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
And the same thing with the trans issue. Like, they've been running scared from it, and it turns out it's a fucking dud. And when Kamala Harris is given the right to go up there and you could easily spin the trans message into an abortion message as well.
Yeah.
Because it's bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
And
no, it's the same principle. But that's the other thing. They don't
even try.
But that's the other thing. So, Mike, that is part of the reason why I think that there is still a slight marginal victory for Kamala Harris here, is that the Republicans have very stupidly hyper-focused on like duds. They are doing the reverse of what the Democrats are doing, ironically enough, by hyper-focusing on idiotic shit like the trans issue. Donald Trump's response to how he's going to solve the economy, while he still polls better because Americans remember a time when Trump was president and think fondly of that time and think that they were doing better. That's the only thing carrying him on the issue of the economy. Donald Trump has demonstrably not presented anything that is even remotely resembling like a path forward on how to fix the economy. And not only that, but also has so personally invested in the anti-trans shit that I think people at least look at Kamala Harris and go, all right, well, she's going to expand on some of the things that Biden did, or she's going to do maybe price gouging. I don't fully understand it, but like she said she's going to expand Medicare to at-home healthcare. Like, I think those are the reasons as to why, if you look at the polls, if you look at like the way that people are viewing Kamala Harris on the economy, she's actually picked up some points on that front in comparison to where Joe Biden was.
Oh, true.
Now, she could be far ahead depending on how she had communicated her future forward, right, from the start. But I do think that is one of the major players here, that like the Republicans are also throwing the election right now as hard as they fucking can by slamming hundreds of millions of dollars in ads on trans issues in a country where 64% of the population is like, I think trans people are discriminated against. Like, I don't really give a fuck. Like, I don't really fucking care. Who cares? This is weird as fuck to hyper focus on.
I do think the Republicans are very weak on their campaign as well, but because it's a very odd campaign, because Trump has already been president, and we've never had in our lifetime a situation where you have an incumbent president running for election where it's not immediately adjacent to his current term. You know what I mean? Like, the gapper situation causes this thing where people have enough. It's been, long enough that nostalgia could kind of kick in, and the problems of then are not exigent anymore, and now it's the problems of today.
I think that's also a communication flaw
for him.
No, but I also think it's a communication flaw from the Democrats. Not reminding people of what it was like when their fucking grandparents were dying with a ventilator in their fucking throat because they believed Donald Trump's lies about COVID is like a perfect way to remind people in a way that Democrats like, because it's like not even an issue, right? You're just talking about the misinformation, the hateful bigotry, and the annoying arrogance of these fucking idiots in the Trump coalition. But they can't do that either, because then you're being mean to Republicans, and you can't be mean to Republicans while simultaneously trying to win Republican votes.
Well, that's the thing. It's important to remind people of like what they hated about Trump, but also to offer them something different. You know, like, you don't want to just remind people that they can avoid the ads by subscribing at the top of the hour. You want to give them the opportunity to also use their primes. You know, they don't just have...
Son of a bitch, dude. God damn. I bring you on and you betray me like this. You steal my fucking...
It is the top of the hour, and the best way to avoid the ads is to subscribe.
That's bullshit. I mean,
I don't know if you guys know this, but tier 3s are actually the single best way to support a streamer, because they count for more. Like, if you spend the same amount of money on a tier 3, it counts for 6 sub points, as opposed to 5 if you were to gift 5 subs. So the best thing to do, tier 3. I mean, obviously. Then you get the extra emotes. It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, reminding people of how bad it was with Trump.
Yeah.
I think that the main reason they failed to do that is because they don't really have a vision of their own. You know, when Walz came in and he had that list of policies that we talked about that he had passed, if they just kind of adopted that as a quick, like, progressive campaign, that's some moderate left policies. Nothing on there was like crazy left wing. Yeah, it wasn't Medicare for all or anything. It was like paid family leave, and we'll protect trans people, and people will be able to take time off to have a kid. Like a family oriented, very very popular policies that have 65+% support, and compare that to Donald Trump and the fear that people felt about losing a job or whatever, and They just don't want to do that because they don't want to make promises. It's just that simple. They don't want to make any promises.
Yeah, but I don't even fully understand why they don't do that. It feels like they just don't want to win. Like, everybody lies. Trump lies all the time. Just fucking lie.
That's actually something that I've been saying for a long time. Give me some lies I can sell.
Yeah,
like, I don't want to be anti-Kamala. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be anti-Kamala. I don't want to, say I can't support genocide, Holocaust, terrorists. That's not what I want to be doing. I would love to be able to go out there and say she's going to be a peace candidate, and she's going to get us $50 minimum wage, and she's going to pass the PRO Act, and she's going to pass the Equality Act, and she's going to do all these great things, but she refuses to campaign on anything. So she leaves me with the fact that she's doing a genocide in Gaza, and she's going to implement Donald Trump's fucking immigration bill. And if she gets into power, she's going to spend 4 years doing what? Primarying Greg Cesar. She's going to spend 4 years with AIPAC trying to pick off every member of the squad. She's going to be doing what? Working with Oklahoma senators to set up death camps for immigrants. Like, what is her plan? And like, she's given me nothing but to say to abstain. And that's where I'm at mentally, and with my vote right now is I can't endorse a candidate who is saying thousands of children dying in Gaza is immaterial to your life.
It seems like you were not captivated by $50,000 in tax cuts for startups in an opportunity economy. I'm starting a new
business every year, baby. Oh my God!
In an opportunity economy, it's quite frustrating.
I will be taking advantage of that. I'll have a merch business one year. I'll be spinning off, I'll start a gaming stream. Mike from PA Gaming will start. I will have, there will be an IRL Mike channel. I'll have like 8 fucking Twitch channels. So I'll have 8 $50,000 tax breaks. It'll be fucking
I'll have
great.
You know, Kamala Harris is prosecuted transnational gangs.
That's the only time she's ever going to say trans. Like, if you're ever expecting her to say anything positive about trans.
I'll have you know, Kamala Harris has prosecuted transnational gangs and also prosecuted transnational small businesses. Okay? She is a small business. She loves small businesses. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's bad here. I don't think it's there is no like very clear pathway to victory here. I simply look at polls which are even more, I feel like even more unreliable than they ever have been. There's obviously junk polls that like greatly favor Donald Trump, that almost feel like messaging polls in general, where they're just like, yeah, no, Trump is up fucking +4 or whatever. And beyond that, I think that like it's still it basically comes down to like the most reputable polls. They're very close. And they still have like a marginal victory for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in the states that she needs to win. I wanted to hear before I let you go, like why you are saying that it's definitely locked. Pennsylvania is definitely gone.
I don't think that is. I actually think that Pennsylvania will probably be one of the closest states. The reason, like my main thought comes to two things. A, the way like the momentum of the polls have all been narrowing. Like all the last like Pennsylvania polls have pretty much been tied or Trump advantaged, and there's maybe like one or two that have Kamala like with a very narrow lead. And when we look at the early vote, let me see if I have this. I have this somewhere. Give me 1 second. You look at the early vote in Pennsylvania right now. I think Kamala Harris, like the Democrats are up 300,000 ballots in their ballot return, and they need to have about a 500,000 vote firewall because the electoral day turnout is always pro-Trump.
Austin is in the chat correcting you. He said 377,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Where did you get that?
He's saying,
how the hell did you get that?
He is. I'm gonna be really honest with you. He is so locked in on poll watch, like it's
That's
crazy.
Amazing, Austin. Thank you.
No, he hasn't.
I was just looking at it.
He is
just looking at it right now.
He's losing sleep every day. He's like losing his mind with fears that Donald Trump is going to win. And
I mean, like Philadelphia turnout was below Pittsburgh turnout for a while there, which is crazy because Philadelphia is like significantly bigger than Pittsburgh. So like that, ladies and gentlemen, is bad. It shows that the polling, so yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the applications, and even right now, the Democrats only have a 504,000 applicant lead, and they would basically need like every single person. I'm looking at the numbers right now. So there's 1,985,329 like vote by mail and absentee ballot requests total, and the Democrats have 1.1 million of those.
Okay, Mike, this is not an ambush at all.
Do you want to debate me? Come on.
Would you want to talk to Austin as well? Austin, would you come on? Would you want to get on the call, Austin, to counter some of?
Absolutely, come debate me, Austin. Everybody,
it's not
come
like a debate. It's not a debate. This is like we're all like-minded individuals.
I don't want this to happen, but I'm really pissed at him.
Who are all trying to hold on. I'm gonna add people into the DM group real quick. I'm gonna add Austin into it.
Bring him in.
We're all trying to make sense of what the fuck's going on, and no one here wants Donald Trump to win, for the record. I know, contrary to popular opinion, contrary to what like naysayers might say, Austin, turn your camera on. Turn your camera on.
Hold on, I don't know what's behind me. Hold on.
You don't know where your camera is?
No,
okay.
No, I'm on my laptop. Hold on.
Listen, I'm not trying to. I'm not. Listen, I know that my position is not going to be popular among a left-leaning community just because it is what it is. But
I think it's. Look, I'm kind of here on the like. I'm in the. I'm of the mindset, Mike, that like I'm not gonna ambush you and be like, you're wrong, she's gonna win. Like that's insane. Like I'm not one of these insane liberals that's like Kamala is gonna like clean house, all the polls are wrong. Like it's a toss-up. At the end of the day, it's a toss-up. I don't think we should feel good. Now, where I do disagree with you is the presentation that the data that you're pulling from the early vote is indicative of her like for sure losing.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I said.
That's the way. That's the way. To me, it's presented. Is that
what I said was I think Pennsylvania will be the closest election, and they need about a 500,000 vote firewall. Right. And they have it. They're in the mid 300s right now. And I was looking at the Pennsylvania Secretary of State website, and I was looking at that, and I was like, even from the requests alone, they're not going to get that. So it's going to be like less than 10,000 votes is what I'm saying.
Where is this? So one thing I wanted to know or ask you is, why people keep tagging me in Hoscord and I can't fucking turn off my fucking notifications?
Go to D&D. Go to Do Not Disturb.
How do I go to streamer mode?
You fucking boomer!
You want me to switch to my PC?
You're a professional fucking streamer. How do you fuck this up?
No, I'm not. Hold on. I don't
want to wait. No, you're cooking. Just put it on Do Not Disturb mode.
I don't know how to do that. Hold on. Just give me a second.
I think it's literally in your bottom left corner on your fucking thing next to your profile picture. Click on that.
Settings. Okay. Do not disturb. Invisible. Do not disturb. Okay, cool.
Do not disturb. Yeah.
All right. My question to you, Mike, is number one, where's this magical 500,000 number? Because I've heard it too. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying
basically it's a ratio. It's a ratio thing. We're kind of making some assumptions, like because we expect the day of vote to be heavily Trump. So
yeah, okay, go ahead.
And the reason why that is because that's just been the pattern that we've seen. Now,
like 2020 and 2022 a little bit, not as much.
So what's weird about Pennsylvania is we really didn't vote by mail much before 2020. So like there's the before 2020 Pennsylvania electoral period and there's the post 2020.
Right.
And the pre 2020 there was basically no vote by mail. You only had to do excused absentee ballots, meaning you had to have a legal excuse to even vote by mail. You couldn't just request one. Right. You had to like swear you weren't going to be at your, voting precinct on the election day. Sure. And so we don't have very many cases to rely on. We're really going by some very wide assumptions.
Yeah, okay. And go ahead.
So what I'm saying is the uncertainty is high.
Yes, of course. I think we both agree on that. I think we both agree that the uncertainty is high. So to say things
these are very good questions, Austin, by the way.
Yeah,
no one else would even ask these.
I mean, that's a man who interviewed Bernard Sanders recently.
The other thing that I think is important to say, because I do think you do a disservice by not sharing this information, and it only goes to your point. There's a lot of unknowns, right? But there is data to support that the GOP has made a significant investment in the last 4 years to bolster their early vote, right? So what you're seeing a lot of right now across a lot of the swing states for the GOP is the Republicans are performing better in the early vote, as you would expect with that type of investment.
So you're saying cannibalization. You're saying that they're cannibalizing what would have been day of votes.
And I'm not saying this is all that's going to happen, but and look, you can say it's copium, but it's reality. They are cannibalizing day of votes.
I don't think it's cope. I think it's a reasonable argument.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that it's but we're all in the same camp here. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think this is information that people should have because it is true, and it's something important to look at.
So the main piece of data that I have to like counter that point is just like when we look at the polls, they start to have like, now that we're really close to the election, they ask you, have you voted yet? Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have like the early vote section of the poll, and then you have the people that are going to vote. And we see in the like are planning on voting in the future a big Trump advantage still. Now I'd have to like really drill down and look at that to see if we could definitively say. But what I would say overall is just like looking at what we have available to us today, a combination of like our vibes, the data, the total data, like what Kamala Harris needs to be at to be assured of win. She's not in that zone. She's in the Donald Trump can win zone.
I mean, for sure.
That's where we're at. Yeah. And I'm more doomer than other people because I just personally think that her mistakes are so big.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. By the way, for the record, I'm sitting here nodding my head. I think all of like the campaign has been an absolute disaster. So
it
like
started out strong.
I don't
It started out really
disagree.
strong, and it's really gotten bad. And I really am disappointed by that.
It's frustrating, but we all agree that like the campaign has been a fucking disaster. I'm just saying that I'm not as doomer as you are. And the other thing is that like I don't know where I found this stat, but in 2020, I think what we're all making this assumption because we all paid very close attention to the 2020 race, right? And Republican day of voting, where Republicans like show up and vote on the same day, was like R plus 30, right? In 2022, that fell from like R plus 30 to like an R plus 10. Because in 2022, obviously, it's
but Trump, is a midterm, and Trump wasn't in there. And also, we know.
Oh my God. It's an important data set to look at because it does mean something. It may not like be something that you can extrapolate into the main election.
You can extrapolate it. It is already extrapolated. It's that Kamala's leading on high propensity voters.
I could talk about this if you want. So like just very quickly, we have a high propensity versus low propensity. What we've seen is a shift that's been very unusual. Like for almost the entire political history, the Republicans were the party of higher propensity voters, meaning lower turnout election equals higher likelihood of Republican win.
Rich voters, wealthier voters.
Yeah, because like the more educated you are, the more money you make, which are not always linked, but in general they are. They're not totally though. The more likely you are to vote. So like people who make $1 million a year, they have a 99.9% turnout rate. So so the richer you are, the more you vote. And so historically that was always advantageous for Republicans, lower turnout, special elections, midterms, Republican advantage. But with Trump, there's been kind of like a declassification of the parties, like where we're no longer, how much money you make doesn't tell what party you are anymore. Whereas before it used to be wealthier equals Republican. Now it's not the case. And so what we're seeing is like, and I describe it as like upscale voters, like or class conscious voters or status conscious voters are more Democrat. And then you have like, I don't know, white trashy or trashy people that would think, who own a F-350, they're not poor, right? But they have a certain, like, they have a trashy aesthetic. They have truck nuts. That's not a poor person thing. That's just like an aesthetic thing, right? And so we're seeing that. And with Trump, he does really well with these low propensity voters that are conservative.
Yes.
And so in the midterms, now that we have those high propensity voters, those teachers' pets voters are going Democrat because they don't like the way that Trump makes them look. They don't like the way that he makes the country look, and they're voting as like a status thing against Trump. That means Democrats are going to do way better in midterms and way better in specials than they did before. Now we have the general election for the president. This is the highest turnout election. So the question of who's performing better with the low propensity voters of their side. And I think that it's very, at least in my opinion, very clear that Donald Trump is doing much better with the low propensity Republican conservative type than Kamala Harris is with like the young college student.
And the data you have is from, and I think you use this, you draw this conclusion from the data that you have in Nevada. And I saw that exact same data point.
I think, no, the other one was, it's another thing I posted from a couple of days ago. I mean, all of this data requires you to kind of have like a mental model, right? And then, we all try to make our best case for it.
Yeah, I have a question because genuinely, because I think like all of us, you guys are experienced professional political commentators. I'm a guy that tunes in every 4 years to look at Twitter.
Oh, you tune in all the time. Don't start.
But my point is, I've got a question. I've looked at this. To what degree is this Target Smart website? To what degree is this like providing accurate data?
Well, first of all, Target Smart is great. They're a great company. I've used them myself. In fact, and basically what they do is they try to link stuff with voter files. And they try to do like I bought them for digital advertising and campaigns before, but basically what they do is they try to line up like you buy ads for people that are like in your district and like you could like target them and you could they're micro targeting shit. I like Target Smart. They're great. Why?
Okay.
What data are you looking at?
Well, I've been looking at data specifically. Look, Pennsylvania, admittedly, of all the blue wall states, the Republicans are performing the best in the early vote, right? According to Target Smart.
Wisconsin's not looking too good either.
or Nevada.
Wait. Why is Wisconsin not looking too good?
Where are you seeing this? This is interesting. I never saw this before.
According to Modeled Party, and I don't know that's why I asked how accurate it was. But according to Modeled Party on Target Smart, if you go to the state, you go to Wisconsin, by percentage, the Democrats are slightly overperforming by percentage their early turnout by percentage of the total electorate.
Do you have a link to this so I can take a look at what you're talking about?
Slightly overperforming their here, let me show you. They're slightly overperforming their 2020 at this point with 12 days to go by percentage of the current voting electorate. And Republicans are underperforming by like half. Like at this point in 2020, Republicans had made up of actually more than Democrats, 43.4% of the electorate with 11 days to go. And now today they make up 21.9% of the electorate. The biggest change in the electorate is the independent unaffiliated category at 41.8% of the electorate.
I gotta look at this one. This is a little odd. I mean,
that's what I said. Well, that's what I was wondering. It's like, to what degree is this Wisconsin?
I wouldn't be surprised if like one piece of data was a little bit off. That's interesting. So
that's what I was like. Look, if you look at Wisconsin,
do you know what these modeled parties things are? In case
I have no idea.
curious.
That's why
okay, so
asking, what does that mean?
So basically, the DNC has its data that they usually use this thing called VAN, right? Mm-hmm. And in DNC, they have access to these Democratic Party voter files. Mm-hmm. And they have like statisticians and things that put together these models, and they integrate like all sorts of data that these campaigns have collected over the years with like big data information. Like, you know, are you subscribed to Men's Health? Are you subscribed to, you know, who fucking knows? You know, you have all sorts of products that you've bought and institutions and organizations that you're memberships of, you know, and they create these models based on each voter, and they have a personalized voter score. Right? So that's what they're doing, is they're taking people that have like returned their ballot, and that's publicly available information, and they're linking it with the Democratic Party's like modeled score of your partisanship. And we all have two scores. The first score is our voter propensity score, and that's 0 from 100, and then we have a voter partisanship score 0 to 100. And so they're trying to see, you know, if you have like above an 80 or whatever, that you're like a Democrat for sure, right? And that, I think, is what they're doing with modeled party, because it's not like your registration per se. It's like what their scores say that you are.
So, okay.
So what's happening here is like...
They don't report by registration in Wisconsin or Michigan. So the model is doing...
Is that true? Is that true? I don't know enough about those states.
No, Wisconsin, they don't report by registered party. So we don't know exactly. So I'm just looking off...
That makes sense with the unaffiliated number then. That means there's some sort of issue with the model where it's like not...
It's not able
scoring
to tell
people as Republican, you know what I mean? They're scoring a lot more people as
is this an assumption that we make, or that, you know, that's what I'm saying, you know, like, are we making this assumption? Because if you look at the state of Wisconsin based on, I'm not trying to debate you here, but just based on Target Smart, something that you said to be very,
I think they're good. I mean, I don't know.
Right? It is showing in Michigan, or also if you go tab over to Michigan. At this point in 2022 or 2020, with 11 days to go in the election, the Democrats are outperforming themselves. Like from at this point in 2020, they were 41% of the electorate. In 2024, this model says they're 52.2%. The Republicans are underperforming at this point with 11 days to go at 37.7%. Of the electorate.
So I mean,
by this model, now I don't know how reliable this particular model is, but that's just what it says. And I'm not. This is just where I'm going to find my information. So
yeah,
to your point, I agree with you and how the Harris administration is handled from a policy standpoint. I'm not disagreeing with any of what you guys say with how the administration has handled themselves, or the campaign has handled themselves. Like, I think they've done a terrible job. I'm just looking at the raw data, and I'm asking for what you make of this.
So what I would say is like I would say that any state that doesn't report by registration and is doing a modeled party thing and they have like big changes and like
Mhm.
10% plus, that doesn't track. So like there is something going on with the model where you can't like use it. It doesn't make sense that like the unaffiliated would jump by 10% like that and the Republican would drop by 10%. You know what I mean? That's
Well,
not like not possible. Like if you
well, you're
go to
seeing,
like
yeah, but you're seeing. Hold on, but in Pennsylvania, with registered party, you are seeing a 10% jump by Republicans in early voting.
yeah, that would be bad, right? Like
No,
that
not
makes more
necessarily, because we talked about the GOP's investment, and it makes sense why Republicans are performing better in the early vote. That's what I'm trying to say.
right,
It makes sense. It
right.
tracks. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying that she's going to win. I'm just saying, based on what we know, I think a lot of us remember 2020. 2020, we were in a global pandemic. The voting patterns are going to be completely different in this election. And I know 2022
Not
is high
completely.
propensity.
No, I mean
Yeah, not
it's
completely.
universal mail and universal registration is a pretty significant driver of turnout.
Definitely. Like it was much easier to turn people out in 2020 than it is now, right? Like especially in Pennsylvania. So like here's the thing about these models. This reminds me of 2016 very much because when in
Okay.
2016 I was working in Northampton County, which is
Mhm.
like the swing county. It's one of these what we call pivot counties. They voted for Obama twice and then they voted for Trump in 2016. And I
Yeah.
was there in 2016 and we were doing some GOTV work with Hillary Clinton's models.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
we were going and knocking at people's doors and expecting them to be strong Hillary supporters, you know.
Sure.
So they were like Democrat partisan, but their propensity was lower. So we were trying to make sure that this Democrat actually went out and voted this time, right? Which
Okay.
is a
Yeah,
key
yeah.
turnout goal. Is get
Mhm.
if people like could agree with you but not show up, or they could like definitely show up but not agree with you. So you want to change, you want to persuade those people and you want to make the people that agree with you show up. That's the goal of a campaign, right? In a nutshell. And we were finding way too many Trump supporters. We were finding like, oh, this data is totally off. Why are we running into so many people that we think are Democrats that are Republican? And the answer was they didn't do uh, normal campaign field work where you try to contact people ahead of time and then
Mhm.
like they say I pledge to vote for Hillary and then you mark them down as a Hillary supporter and then later when the election is happening you come and turn them out in GOTV that would get out the vote, right? And so because they skipped and they just used models, they were mistargeting a ton. So whenever I see a modeled score and it's like a very important part of anybody's like mental strategy of like what's going to happen, I'm very skeptical of it. It's not that it's wrong. It's just I don't find it plausible that there would be such a huge shift. And when I look at
Mhm.
like the PA on Target Smart when they have those like registrations, I'm seeing like 65% of 2020 model party Democrat, 1 million, right? And then
Mhm.
64% model party Democrat, 727,000. That tracks to me. What I mean by
Mhm.
that is like, we're not seeing a 2020 turnout. We're seeing a significant drop of 30% of the number of people that are voting by mail because everybody was voting by mail in the pandemic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And a slight drop off in enthusiasm, right? So
Mhm.
we're instead of 65%, we're seeing 64. And
Mhm.
you know, it also makes sense with the story you were telling me about how much money was invested with Republicans. A lot more
Yes.
Republicans are turning out, so that
Mhm.
tracks, right? So
Mhm.
you have
Mhm.
376,000 of Republicans voting early, and in 2020 it was 429,000, which is
Mhm.
shocking because like a lot more people are voting by mail in 2020. The fact that the Republicans are nearly at 2020 levels in the vote by mail, that means they're ahead of the curve of what you would expect. The Democrats are down 30% in the count, and the Republicans are only down by like 5% in the count. That's a concerning fact. Now, the copium is they're cannibalizing. That's the hopium. That could be true. We will only know that on election night. Unfortunately, all we have to go by is the polling, which shows 48-48, right?
Sure. I mean, yes. But like I said, I know 2022 is a high propensity voter. Uh, is a high propensity voter
High
election.
turnout election 2020.
2022. I'm sorry, the midterms.
Oh yeah, the
But
midterms,
in
yeah.
the midterms, you saw a lot of these mail-in voters switch to election day. Is what I'm saying.
So you think the Republicans won't have as much of an advantage on election day?
No. I think they're going to have an advantage, but it will not be what we saw in 2020. And I think everybody has this expectation that Republicans are going to show up with a 30-point advantage on election day. And that's why they look at the early voting numbers and they're like, holy fuck, she's going to get killed. But if it's any, like, I know 2022 is a midterm, but a lot of Democrats shifted to election day voting. Look, I'm not saying she's going to win. What I'm saying is the data isn't as bad as it looks, because like we are all stuck.
I agree with you, by the way. I firmly agree with you. I think that early voting data you have to take with a gigantic grain of salt. Like you shouldn't use it as your primary argument. I think the main argument for Kamala Harris losing is just the polling averages are bad, and it's hard to poll those low propensity Trump voters.
For sure.
You know what I mean? That's the main argument for her losing. It's not the early voting data.
I more have Hasan's perspective on the polling, which I agree with you that voter is hard to poll, but polling is all over the fucking place. I mean, pull up some of these polls and look at like the demos of some of these polls. I saw a poll where like Trump was winning 55% of the it was a poll that everybody was freaking out about. They're like, oh my God, Trump's ahead by this much in this particular swing state. And you pull the tabs and it's like 55, Trump's winning 55% of the women vote. They're all over the place. They're all over the place because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to make the mistakes that they made in 2020. They don't want to make the mistakes that they made in 2016. So I actually think that you should take polling with a grain of salt. They're all. I
agree with you. I agree with you. I think the main thing that you can say right now is it's a toss up. It's the most toss up of toss ups.
Yes.
But the reason why I tend to lean toward the more doomer aspect of it is just the intangibles and all the vibes and like they're down for Democrats. That's for me.
Can I say some truth that I think people may disagree with it? Look, she's run a terrible campaign. Like she's run an awful campaign, in my opinion.
I think she's done some right things, and then she's also failed.
In many ways, she doesn't. Be based on a lot of factors, she doesn't deserve to win in the eyes of this community. And so a lot of people there isn't a lot of copium in this chat. A lot of people think she's going to lose, and people want her. Like I don't even know if they want her to lose, but they want to feel vindicated by that fact. Right?
I 100% agree with you that we are more likely to want her to lose.
I'm not saying that they're wrong for that. I'm not saying anybody's wrong for that. However, what I'm saying is there is no, like, even when I present like things that are fact, that in the data, call it copium, hopium, whatever you want, it's shoved away in this community because people refuse to accept the fact that she could possibly still win.
No, I think that anybody.
Okay. First of all, I want to clarify. I have maintained the position that Kamala Harris, especially a couple months ago, was going to win.
I know you have, but a lot of people here, Hasan, every time I presented something that is very true. The GOP made a huge effort to get out the vote, get out the early vote, to reverse their earlier strategy of like calling it voter fraud. They have done that and they're seeing success. They saw a little bit more in 2022 and even more in 2024. So you would expect their share of vote to be more representative in the early vote. And that's happening. But like when you present that as like, oh, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's getting her ass kicked when you compare it to 2020 based on these factors, people just like brush it aside and be like, oh, bullshit, cope.
No,
you know what I mean?
I think your argument is actually this is actually a major source of concern, definitely for the right, because they stupidly were like, oh, don't vote by mail. It's all a scam. That was very stupid and ill-considered. Like in Arizona, for example, Republicans had been the people who had an edge in vote by mail for many, 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 many years, many, many cycles. Arizona used to be like kind of like the white Republican would vote by mail. And it now, when Trump kind of like did his whole thing about, oh, don't vote by mail, that's very stupid because when somebody votes by mail, you can bank them early and you can call them up and they'll say, oh, yeah, I already voted for you and I sent my mail-in ballot already. And then you can go and see, did that actually happen? And you can, were they an absentee ballot requester? Or did they return it? That's usually available information for a campaign. So you can like literally start counting your votes and you have a model of the election and you have what we call a win number, right? In a campaign, everybody has a win number, which is the number of votes they believe they're going to need to hit in order to win, 50% plus one, right? And that is what every campaign is trying to do, is find that win number and deliver that win number through a combination of their, their field organizers and their field campaign and their paid canvassing and everything they're doing to try to get to that number. And I don't think you're wrong to point to the fact that the Republicans have changed course on here. I think that's actually a really good point, that you can't just say what happened in 2020 is going to happen again. You can't do that. That's fucking stupid. Right. I think the main reason why I'm more skeptical of this is it's just like, I think the problems with polling are still around, and like, because of the compositional change of the Democratic Party toward these higher propensity, more likely to respond to polling demographics, if there's a polling error, it seems to me more likely than not that it would be against Trump than for Trump. You know what I mean? Like these, the lower propensity white voters, they're not the ones picking up the phone and saying how, they're not sitting there for 35 fucking questions. You know what I mean? Like, and there some changes have been made to try to capture those people, but that's kind of the problem that I see is when the election is this tight.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They have
it's not good for her.
Pollsters have to make a decision. They have to guess what the electorate composition will be. And then they'll take that and they'll go do polls. Like they'll go poll that percentage of the demographic. They at a certain point they have to guess. And historically, they've been wrong in 2020 and 2016 with the general election. So, I mean, there's reason to believe that they are overcorrecting here, but we'll see. Who knows? God knows.
So your belief is that there's kind of a systemic bias against the Democrats in the pollsters, and that they are modeling so here's the thing. Can we talk about likely voters for a second? So like how that actually works. So there's like two different methods of doing it. You have like a hard likely voter screen and what we call a soft likely voter screen, right? And the hard is basically looking at, does this person vote? Do they have a track record of voting? And only talking to those people. And then the other side is a soft likely voter screen is this person registered to vote? Yes. And then you ask them, how likely are you to vote? And if they don't say extremely likely or certain to vote, they get kicked out. So like, it's to be a likely voter is a very high bar for a polling. Like, they're kicking out a lot of people that are going to vote. Like, so and I know this because I've purchased like 5 different polls myself. Like I've gone through with these questions of like, how are we going to model it? Are we going to, the things that you're talking about, like what electoral map do we have? And the reality is, when you do a polling with the raw data, you're not going to get the same, like the correct proportions of what the demographics of the electorate actually are. See what I mean? Like if I call 1,000 voters, I'm not going to get the same ratio of each demographic group and each, in perfect alignment. I have to make some changes. Which means I have to, and I'm not going to throw out responses. Let's say I get twice as many educated white men as I need. I'm not going to throw the responses out. I'm just going to weight each one of them by 50%. That's how these polls work. And so, that's why we have these big error bars. And that's the problem with kind of doing too much poll unskewing and diving into the crosstabs too much, because each one of those categories has a huge error bar that is just so big. You can't really you can't excessively focus on those like crosstabs because they're just so uncertain. And you unless you're doing what we call an oversample, where you like intentionally try to get a demographically representative sample of a subcategory, you shouldn't dive into you shouldn't try to go into them too deep. This is a kind of me autistically data dumping. I'm sorry, but this is the important thing to know.
I mean, it's something that I didn't know. And again, like I said, and like Hasan said, we don't want Trump to win. You know what I mean?
I want Kamala Harris to come out tomorrow and say, let's do a ceasefire in Gaza and let's do an arms embargo. And I think Joe Biden was a fucking idiot and he was too soft on corporations.
Me too.
That's what I want her to do tomorrow. Okay.
I would love that. And it is mind-numbingly frustrating why this is even fucking close.
It's close because she has not
run a good why it's close, but it's annoying why it's close. That's why. It's fucking annoying.
She did really well in the debate. She did really well in the set pieces, and then it got to the point of like, why are you running for president, Kamala Harris? And she doesn't really have an answer for that. And that's like the most fundamental problem is you have to have some passion, some reason, some campaign ideas that are really important to you. And they're just she's just so stage managed, and she sticks so much to talking points, and she says nothing that is like authentic. It doesn't come across that way. Like, she comes across as like repeating the same like 5 things. And I understand why she's doing that, but it's very much not popular with like younger generations, which she desperately needs.
Yeah, and the Democrats, it's just like they have no killer instinct at all. None
You're
at all.
telling me.
No killer instinct. Like, why didn't they were fucking cooking with the weird? These motherfuckers are weird. They're obsessed with trans people and
no, you don't understand. You don't understand. You don't understand. We have to make sure that we love the Republicans. That's what's important.
Like as a career Democrat, okay, as somebody who has been practically like a Democrat by name since I was like 8 years old. Okay, why the fuck would I give a shit about what Liz fucking Cheney has to say? And you know who that? And you said it earlier, Hasan. You know who that excites? My parents, who are also career liberals. Okay, it doesn't get anybody. It moves nobody.
So it's going to really blow your mind when the Democrats are campaigning with Donald Trump against Tucker Carlson in 8 years. When Donald Trump is like, I always knew Tucker Carlson was a cuck.
Yeah, like
he's gonna be out there with fucking Pete Buttigieg, and everybody's gonna be like, oh God, Donald Trump, my king.
If what Mike is saying right now to those in the chat comes across as shocking to you, that's because you're too young to remember how much people despise George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Okay.
Yeah, I'm old. I was
like
one of those people.
like it sounds unimaginable with today's eyes, but like the level of disapproval that George W. Bush had on his way out, that Dick Cheney had on his way out.
Do you know what Dick Cheney's was when he left?
Like it is. I don't remember what the exact approval rating was, but it was so fucking bad.
8% or 12%. Yeah, that's something like that. George W. Bush was like 25.
Yeah. People were so excited for Obama to come in. His approval rating in the beginning was like 60-some%, wasn't it? Like 65%.
Like he could have come in there and done a New Deal. Like but you know, and that's part of why, like the reason why, like not to get too off into a tangent, but just the reason why we're having these crises with fascism rising is because when we had an economic crash, we did not respond to it. And we kicked a bunch of people out of their homes. And we had the slowest recovery in the history of America economically because they did austerity. And that led fundamentally from Obama handing the baton to Trump because they just left so many people to rot in so many places that were deep, deep blue. You know, like Northampton County voting for a Republican is fucking insane because they had Bethlehem Steel headquarters there. We're talking about like they built the Golden Gate Bridge's steel beams were built in Bethlehem Steel's works. Like the idea that would vote for a Republican is fucking insane.
Okay.
And that is the crisis that we still haven't fixed.
Not to go back to the election here.
Yeah, of course. Why are we doing that?
No. But I want to ask you, Mike, of all the swing states, what state do you think she's performing the best in at this point?
Man, I really do think that the state that this works the most in, the strategy she's running, is probably Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, because they're whiter. Mm-hmm. And so like, you know, like in Pennsylvania, like we're talking about the collar counties. So we're talking about like Bucks County, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Lehigh County, maybe Berks a little bit, you know, we're talking about Luzerne, we're talking about Erie, we're talking about, these are like all these counties, you know, the Scranton counties and the Erie County and you know, Allegheny, these are like much whiter than they're non-evangelical, college educated, upscale whites. Okay. So those are the people that the ideas that Kamala Harris is like running on is the best strategy. You know, like these people were, you know, they're country club members. All right. So like they're definitely being appealed to. That being said, I'm very concerned about like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh young people turning out and people of color. And That's the other side of the coin. And I think Pittsburgh, like Pennsylvania is like a very diverse state. People don't understand like just how big these cities are. Like Philadelphia is a gigantic city. Pittsburgh is not a small city. Like there's like a very large diverse populations here, and it is offset by like some of the most like rural, like some of the most annihilated counties in the entire country for neoliberalism, like where they lost like 80% of their population and they have like incredible opioid overdoses. And, so there's a very strong like anti-democrat feeling in a lot of these places as well. And so we're talking about so many different cross currents. I think Pennsylvania is probably where this strategy does work the best. There's a reason why Chuck Schumer said, for every blue collar worker, we're going to make them up in these collar counties of Philadelphia. It's because that is really the place where they are the most prevalent. And I do think they have broken a little bit more against Trump. They really just don't like him. But that being said, like the data to me kind of indicates actually very, very, very razor thin election in Pennsylvania. And if that's the case,
and also it doesn't matter if Kamala cannot continue, if Kamala cannot rely on her normal constituencies in the urban areas, then she's fucked. That's why I think your statement about voter enthusiasm, especially among 18 to 34, is very important. If there's not enough enthusiasm, either because they are genuinely fearful of a potential Trump presidency, or because, and this is laughable to even think of, that they're excited to vote for the Democrat, simply because she's the Democrat.
I think when we, my feeling is it's going to, like, I put out a map. Basically, I think she loses because she loses Michigan and the Sun Belt. And that's kind of like my mental belief. That's what makes the most sense to me. And I think she probably could hold on to Pennsylvania, and I could see that happening.
Isn't she performing relatively well in Detroit right now? Or at least turnout in Detroit is up?
So I think Michigan I think they have more money than God. And I think they're doing not as bad of a job in Detroit that they could be. They're kind of like, the problem is like they're not outperforming 2020. And 2020 was so tight that it's hard to be like, get too excited.
Right. Nothing is going to outperform 2020, like other than like the amount of votes that we're going to see at this point, right? Unless you're Georgia, right? Unless it's Georgia, right?
I think Georgia has like, I saw like in Georgia, the one thing that made me kind of like go, okay. I mean, mentally, I think Georgia is full of a lot of racist white people. And like when you look at Georgia, I shouldn't have said racist. I'm sorry. Evangelical Christian white people. And they don't really like to vote for black candidates. So I just have a hard time believing it's going to happen. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock being the only exception.
Do you think that there's a bunch of like random questions? Do you think there's people out there that voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but they're too racist to vote for Kamala Harris in 2024? I'm like, genuinely, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yes, but I think it's more likely they just don't show up.
Okay.
I have like people flipping from one party to the other in one cycle is pretty rare. Usually people just kind of like get disillusioned with their party, and it takes a while to like fully flip. And so like that's kind of I just think I think with like Georgia in particular, the problem is just like demographically it's not anywhere near as nicely set up as like Pennsylvania, where like the Pennsylvania whites are much more willing to vote for a black candidate.
I'm looking at Detroit's turnout by percentage of 2020's like total vote. And right now, with 10 days to go, they've turned out 31.4% of their total 2020 turnout. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what is.
I would have to know what the turnout was in 2020. I think if they're anywhere near, if they're ever, exactly. If they're everywhere near like 20, like if they were on the same pace or near to the pace of where 2020 is, I would say that's a lock. I would say they would win. Like if Kamala Harris is like above 2020 in any place, that would be like a huge. Yeah, well, I would be like,
So
Much
if you
more
were to
likely
hit,
believe it.
and I follow a very libbed up account on
Which
Twitter.
account is it?
It's Umish Voter. Okay, I don't follow them, but
First
I see
of all,
them.
can I
No,
just
that's
say
not a
this?
libbed up account. That's a decent one.
You Mish Voter is probably the most honest lib account on the entire website of twitter.com.
Yeah, Umish Voter is pretty good.
I think that they're not a team sports guy and that they only post propaganda. I think they try to. I think they're probably one of my favorite lib accounts because they're actually sane.
Let me be clear, okay? A lot of people think that I'm out there like an MSNBC liberal, okay? I've come a long way. Like, I read tweets. Sometimes I need a little help and hopium, and I'll read down a tweet, and they'll be like, Kamala's gonna win, and let me like look into it. And then they'll say some shit like Florida and Texas are in play, and I'll be like, God fucking damn it! And to me, it'll delegitimize every part of that tweet, and I will look away from it because clearly
you're right.
They are
yes, Austin remembers a time when he was that. That's why.
Yes,
I mean,
last election.
I think if Kamala Harris came out here
Austin phone banked in Texas last election.
I did. I'm going to phone bank again, by the way.
That was a lot more justified back then because the polls were showing it a lot closer, but the polls were wrong.
Yeah.
You doing that was not actually that crazy because the polls were giving you that indication, but the polls were underestimating Trump.
I will say, like, my mom called me today and she's like, Kamala Harris is in Texas. Is it in play? I'm like, no, I think she's doing it for the Senate candidate.
She's doing it for Allred.
I think that Allred, like, first of all, Ted Cruz is just the scum of the earth. So if there's anybody who could get surprised, it would be Ted Cruz. But I just have a hard time thinking it's happening in a presidential year.
I'm not banking on that.
I do hope it happens, for the record. It's like one of those.
I would love it.
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what people say, like, oh, you're pro-genocide. Like, sure, okay. As long as, whatever you say to me, as long as Ted Cruz is no longer in the Senate, I'm on board. I don't give a fuck who it is. I turn into a bigger lib than Austin when it comes down to fucking unseating that goblin, that fucking demon.
So the thing about, like, I think Florida is going to vote to the right of Texas. I mean, didn't they?
Yes. I think that's a good get. I think that's a good bet.
Like, I think it's going to continue. Like, and when you said, like, you look at Miami-Dade, like, I spent a lot of time in Miami.
Lift the siege on Cuba. Like, come on.
Yes, it is so fucking insanely batshit crazy conservative. They're so crazy down there. Like I said, I spent weeks there last year. Like every other weekend I was in Miami. And
Benjamin Netanyahu's son.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see him out there.
You didn't see him out there, no.
Okay. Yair Netanyahu, the groiper.
Unless he was at the fucking gay bar.
The Nazi.
Yeah, he's the
son.
Unless he was at the gay bar, I didn't see him.
Jewish groiper, 1488.
Yeah. I spent most of my time at Twist and Palace. Okay,
Palace. Are those the spots?
Palace is like the best drag brunch in the country. It's so weird for how conservative Florida is. The gay scene in Florida, like in Fort Lauderdale, the Manor, there's weird, like oddly, like more progressive.
That's not odd at all, Austin. Like, did you go to the RNC? I bet you Grindr was more fired up during the RNC than it was during the DNC, honestly.
Yeah, I heard about that. But like there's like a gay strip club.
No, Florida's not gay at all. It's just all Hispanic people. Austin just thinks they're gay.
No, well, that is true, but like the Manor is gay as fuck.
He sees like a Latino man, and he's like, "Oh, that's a homosexual," and he's like, "Oh, never mind. That's the most misogynistic, homophobic person I've ever met in my life," and he's voting for Donald Trump.
That doesn't mean they're not gay.
No,
he's right. He's right because like you see these people, and then you see them at Twist, which is the gay club, and they look the same. Like it's the same outfits. Everything's the same. But anyway, yeah, that's no shock to me that Miami-Dade is like conservative. And like, I don't even think that we'll see the Democrats catch up at all in Florida. I don't even think
that sucks.
Like, when we get into like voting election day, I don't think it'll ever flip back blue. Like once,
that sucks. That's really bad.
Like it's just not going to happen. Like the votes have flipped to like red. We're not going to see it like swing back blue. I don't think at all for the rest of the cycle. Like it's just going to be red the whole time. Like Florida's going to be called like at the beginning of the night.
Well, I'm so surprised because Florida ran a former Republican congressman as the Democratic nominee for governor last cycle, and I thought that was like the secret of getting Republicans to vote for you is to just run really right wing.
I don't look at Florida and what's happening in Miami-Dade as like what's going to happen anywhere else because
no, I don't think anybody's looking at Florida as it's the same thing with Ohio, right? Like the Democrats have fumbled Florida and Ohio with kind of this bland centrism. And other than we're holding on to Sherrod Brown with the skin of our we need him. Like if the Democrats don't win that Iowa Senate seat.
Bro, Sherrod is even worse than what I say Sherrod because it's not his name is Sherrod Brown.
I know. I was just
Sherrod is the most insane way I've ever heard someone refer to him.
Okay. Now I'm
At least Sherrod is like funny because you expect him to be Sherrod Brown. You're like, oh, that's like a black guy. And then you're like, oh my God, that's just the whitest man you've ever seen. Like,
actually, he's a really
Sherrod sounds like a alien from fucking Star Trek.
Like somebody's drag name. But yeah, what was I saying? He's probably the highest above replacement level senator in the nation. Like people say like Manchin or whatever, and it's like nah. It's Senator Brown from Ohio. So hopefully he wins.
Genuinely, go ahead. Sorry,
because there's two things with this election. The first is is Kamala Harris going to lose, and just how far behind are the Democrats going to get in the Senate? Because if they get beyond the reach of actually taking the Senate back, then literally will never be able to do anything or appoint another judge ever. So that's kind of what I've been looking at. Can the Senate hold? I'm not as worried. I mean, if Harris loses, she deserves it. But how much damage is she doing down ballot?
So, genuine question. Is in 4 years, are we looking at another election? What is Trump going to do to is he going to cling to power? Are the is the country over as we know it? What is going to happen in your opinion if he wins?
Well, I mean, the president is incredibly powerful, and this is something that liberals don't like to hear. So he can do tremendous damage. And obviously, with the Supreme Court already being radically right wing, if we also lose the Senate, then you're probably going to see a couple retirements, and then the 6-3 majority will be locked in a little bit harder. I think that the main thing we need to be focusing on is getting the biggest landslide we can in the midterm. I think, Donald Trump is going to do some dumbass fucking shit. People are going to hate his guts. His policies are very unpopular. And when it's just him standing on the stage, I think that, and not on the ballot, I think we have an opportunity to organize against
you're
them.
You're gonna see a lot of woke liberals remember when the Democratic Party was abolish ICE?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's not even a radical opinion because ICE was fucking created because of Bush.
Yeah, and also
people forget
ICE
is some sort of a radical fucking position.
People forget. Yes,
the Patriot Act is new.
You're absolutely correct. From ICE and Department of Homeland Security is relatively new, and a lot of people have forgotten that it is a relatively new thing, and they take it for granted. But I'm just simply stating that Kamala Harris running on Medicare for all, or even voting on what I like to call the most progressive messaging bills of all time, whenever there's a fucking Republican in charge and holds the Senate and the House, is exactly what the Democrats did. The Democrats were way more radical under the Trump administration than they actually ended up becoming when they were actually in power.
The one thing I would say to people, if you're lived up and you're if Donald Trump wins, it's the end of the world. I wouldn't say that. What I would say is it would obviously be a massive repudiation of neoliberalism. It would be a massive repudiation of interventionism, of warmongering, and I think a lot of it would be an opportunity for all of us to kind of shake off the fleas that are the last 4 years of this incredibly damaging war in the Middle East that's expanding out of control.
This is where I disagree with you 100%. I think it's an opportunity for organizing for sure. You're right about that, 100%.
Well, okay, are you saying that you think the Democratic Party is going to go to the right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, here's the thing about that. There's no such thing as a Democratic Party. It's not like it's not like a party in Europe with a central list and they have the opportunity to discipline people and kick it out. All the Democratic Party is a brand name and a spot on the ballot. Whatever people vote for is what the Democratic Party is. So we have the opportunity to elect more progressive candidates in an open field, in an open primary. I don't know what is going to happen. Could someone more conservative get elected? Yeah. Could someone more to the left get elected? Yeah. Bernie Sanders was nowhere, and he came out of nowhere in 2015. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, but also Bernie Sanders.
The idea that we should just say, if Harris loses, it's going to also mean that we're going to turn even more right wing.
No, the only thing I'm pointing to is post 2016. Look at post 2016. Look at 2020. Look at where we're at now. The Democratic Party only has one speed, and that's going right.
Well, we lost. We lost the debate. We lost the vote. We were close. And we got a lot of progressive people in office, and some of those people have lost, and some new people have joined. And a lot of issues that would have never been considered, like Medicare for all or all these other things, even opposing Israel at all, would never have been considered.
I don't think you're right about that. I just do not foresee a future where the Democratic Party goes, well, I learned my lessons from this last electoral defeat. They're going to do the exact same thing that they did in 2016.
Not. No, the people in power now are ideological neoliberals freaks, and they're going to try to hold on to power. And it'll be our job to throw them out and have no sentiment and to go after all of them as viciously as we can and throw them the fuck out and try to get a actually decent social democratic platform put together where this generation takes the lead from the rapidly dying boomers. If we let Nancy Pelosi keep power, if we let all these fucking freaks that are supporting the genocide of Gaza keep power, that'll be on us. That's the reality. Is like this cycle, we never got a chance to speak. It was no one ran against Joe Biden, and then it was handed to Kamala, and none of us got the chance to speak. If Kamala loses, the one thing we'll get is a chance to speak in the Democratic Party. Maybe we'll lose.
I think you're hopeful. I don't think that's going to happen.
You have to be a socialist. A socialist has to be irrationally optimistic, fundamentally in our core. If you don't believe that a better future is possible, then you're no longer a socialist. You are a liberal. Doomerism is the last stage of your liberalism.
No, I think I'll keep advocating for the same things that I've been advocating for. I'll keep trying to organize. I'll keep trying to build some kind of counter momentum within the Democratic Party. But having said that, I have no confidence that the Democratic Party will go down.
Let me give you one vignette.
I think they would. I think they would rather blow up the ship than allow.
Of course they would
allow any kind of like progressive.
Of course they would. Well, then we don't let them. Well, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Hold on, she hasn't lost yet, guys. Come on.
Okay, yeah, if she wins, well, then that's probably the worst outcome, because when she wins, they're going to do their damnedest to kick out every single person who ever said the word free Palestine in the history of the planet, and they're going to be trying to get Liz Cheney registered as the next senator from New York City, or from New York.
Is she going to put I don't want a Republican in the cabinet.
But the donors do.
I think I'm going to be honest with you. I think if they lose... Mike, I think if they lose, they're going to do the same thing.
Okay, well, then you're really just saying the Democratic Party is lost. But I agree with you, but I'm not going to let them have it because I know something you don't know. The voters don't like them that much. Like, the voters don't really give a shit about these people.
I know, but I think this last election cycle has basically solidified that position that, like, they don't give a fuck that the voters don't like them. They don't
give a fuck. That's our job, to make them give a fuck by throwing them out. I mean, and make them scared. Does it going to happen overnight? No, I don't think it'll happen overnight. Like, look at Sean Fain. The old UAW leadership was literally taking bribes from Stellantis executives to fuck over their workers. It was impossible to run for leadership in the UAW. It was locked down with the most corrupt motherfuckers connected to organized crime and were anti-left, anti-communist, corrupt pieces of shit taking bribes to fuck over their workers, create 2 tiers of worker to get rid of their pensions. And what happened is that the Bernie Sanders people, they went into UAW with Sean, and they said, we're going to bring back the UAW back to its roots. And they won a narrow election, partially using the graduate student voters of the UAW, and they took it over. And then they got the best contract they've gotten in decades. And the left in the UAW is leading the charge. They forced Joe Biden to show up at a picket line because they said, if you don't, we're not going to endorse you. So he fucking cravenly had to show up with his tail between his legs. What I'm saying is things that we think are not possible suddenly become possible. So your first mission as a leftist is to stop playing the dumb liberal game of blinkering what you think can happen. We have no fucking idea what's going to happen. I remember I ran for office in 2014 before you people were even alive. Okay. And what happened? I was considered to be a left-wing crazy, and I was like a progressive. I wasn't even a socialist at that point openly. And I was like running on, I'm going to start a small business incubator at Lehigh University and shit. Like, this is, obviously I wanted to, tax frackers, and I wanted a moratorium on wells and stuff, all sorts of stuff that was relatively small. And Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement blew up, and we now have a totally new idea of what it is, what you can be to be a left wing.
What you're talking about only happens if, I think, in the way that the way that everything is set up, I think that only happens if there is a Bernie style figure running up against a Hillary Clinton style figure that is like an institutional relic that everyone despises, that has like a litany of some valid and some conspiracy theories launched against them. And then you have like a progressive beacon that is ideologically committed and has a strong track record of being a progressive fighter. And then there's still mistakes that Bernie Sanders made in terms of like
by being too soft.
Yeah, not fighting hard enough. This sort of stuff. Like I don't disagree with you on that front at all. I think win or lose, the Democratic Party is still going to be incredibly hostile, not resistant, incredibly hostile to that sort of progressive momentum. That won't stop me from pushing for it. I have my own
feeling like you're gonna lose. You gotta like have at least the elan to be like, fuck them. And the other thing is, we're never going to see a situation. It's not gonna, if they can see it coming, they're gonna fucking sabotage it. Like that's the obvious. It's going to be something we don't expect, and events are gonna happen.
Well, speaking of events that are going to happen, I have to leave right now. Is
Israel bombing Iran?
Because Israel is, according to reports, bombing Iran. So what that means is the October hasn't ended yet. The October surprise is coming, which is not really a surprise necessarily. So that's what I'm gonna tune into to get some.
That. I'm gonna continue watching the polls and the early voting data, and you guys handle that. Okay.
Well, nice talking to you.
Nice chat with you, Mike.
Yeah, this was great. This was a wonderful conversation.
Ignore my DMs. My DMs were exactly what I said on here.
Oh, is that what you were just yelling at me? Fuck you, Mike. She's fine.
I wasn't saying fuck you. I was just there's one note that I forgot to share, which is I thought the GOP was underperforming in some areas, but you don't think that the model's right.
I just think that when you're talking about like modeled voter, I would just keep that with a grain of salt and not take that very, very seriously. But I would look at the Pennsylvania one as
it's the only thing I got.
All right. That's the only thing you got.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. I'll see you.
All right. Bye. That was Michael from Pennsylvania, also known as Central_Committee, and AustinShow, Mr. Show himself. Austin did such a fantastic job. I'm so proud of him. Neither party was actually considering the most significant aspect of this election, of course, which isn't simply Israel striking Iran, but the top of the hour ad break and what kind of effect that has, what kind of impact that has on the collective psyche of the average American voter in the HasanAbi constituency, which is, as we know, one of the most significant, one of the most impactful constituencies out there, an army of voters.